got everybody in from the waiting room. So I guess I'll just welcome. Thank you all for joining. This is a special meeting of the KFNA, the Kingfield Neighborhood Association's Redevelopment Committee. Redevelopment is a committee of KFNA that looks at development projects, has typically looked at anything kind of in the built environment within our neighborhood. So we are the group that works and reviews projects like this, reviews larger development projects, also works on things like public art or changes to the park or different things that may happen and change within the neighborhood. If that's something that you're interested in being involved in, we would love to have you. The committee is made up of both KFNA board members and community members. There's no barrier to entry. It is send an email and you'll see Sarah, who is the second comment over there on the right side, is the executive director of KFNA. You can reach out to her or you can reach out to myself, and Sarah just put my email address in there. So thinking about affordable housing, thinking about development, thinking about businesses, all that's the sort of stuff that redevelopment does. And if that's something that you would like to participate in, again, we would love to have you. I am excited to have this conversation, and I am excited to talk that we're talking about. I know the term affordable housing and the definition of affordable housing is something that we all have kind of different ideas on. Broadly. I am excited to talk about an affordable housing project here, and I'm excited that we are kicking off and starting another project with the City of Lakes Land Trust. So this is a project, this is going to be talking specifically about 3916 Blaisdell. If you have general comments about affordable housing, you can throw them in here now. We can ask them. We may or may not have answers for them. If you have questions about different development projects, specifically any of the projects on Nicollet, this probably wouldn't be the time to ask those questions. And we held an open house for the previous Nicollet project that came through, and we'll be holding another one for the Kieran site next week. So if you have questions on those projects, please save them, send them to Sarah, or come to that meeting with them. So I'll just quickly read redevelopment's goals and priorities. It's here in Kingfield. It's to increase housing opportunities, promote new commercial and mixed-use developments, enhance the unique character of the neighborhood, respect the environment, encourage public art, and to collaborate with developers. So that's kind of the guiding principles of our group, and we are excited to have the City of Lakes Land Trust here to talk about a project. KFNA and City of Lakes Land Trust have recently, within the last couple of years, partnered on a project at 210 West 46th, which now is occupied, and there's someone living there, which we are really excited about. So I guess if you have a question about that project too, or how that worked, we can discuss that here as well. So I will quickly introduce Stacy, and the two people that you see on the screen are Stacy with the City of Lakes Land Trust and Marnie, who is, I believe, the project's architect. Correct, Marnie? Yeah. I'll give a brief introduction to Stacy, and then I'll kick it over to her. Stacy joined the City of Lakes Land Trust in 2006 and currently serves as the operations director, seeing the organization's daily operations, property development initiatives, and capital grant writing. I'm going to kick it over to Stacy to kind of give an overview of the City of Lakes Land Trust, what kind of their mission is, how they operate, because it's a really unique model, and then talk more broadly about this project here. So again, I think we had one person come in late. If you have questions, please enter them into the chat, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have a conversation, and I will be reading those questions to Stacy and Marnie. So I'll turn it over to you, Stacy. Thank you, everybody. And again, please leave yourselves on mute and your cameras off for the duration of the presentation. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it a great deal. I'm just going to share my screen so that we have an opportunity to see some of the information put together, because I think sometimes it's helpful to view it, actual numbers, and just having some text in front of all of us. As Chris said, I just wanted to spend first few minutes of the presentation going over who the City of Lakes Community Land Trust is and how we do affordable home ownership. Our mission basically is to create community ownership that preserves affordability and inclusivity. And we, about 4 or 5 years ago, really looked deeply at how we wanted to achieve that, and some of the guiding principles that we developed, you'll see in front of you. Responsive, trying to ensure that the programs and services that we design meet community need and leverage our resources responsibly, and also really trying to understand what the community need is and developing it in partnership with community to be inclusive and creating an environment that's respectful and accessible to all community members, buyers, homeowners, and partners. We try to be solution oriented and be innovative. We have, since the inception of the Land Trust, been collaborative. We did not start out as a developer back when the Land Trust was started in 2002, but over the last 6 to 7 years have done many more developments. Originally, we really just started working with private and public partnerships that were developing the homes, and then we would come in with a land trust buyer and bring some affordability assistance and try to preserve that affordability assistance long term. That collaboration effort still continues with many of the private and not-for-profit developers, as well as public partnerships with the county, the city, and the state of Minnesota. And then at the end of the day, trying to demonstrate that the investments that are made through the land trust actually have some impact and are consistent, and we have measurable outcomes. So that's just our overview of some of our guiding principles for the organization. And who we are, if you're not familiar with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, this came out of a community conversation and initiative back in the early 2000s. There was a lot of conversation, I think similar to what's happening in the last couple of years, about the significant need for more affordable housing, and in particular home ownership in the city of Minneapolis. So a number of community partners came together, looked at different models of how affordability could be created and then how it could be preserved. And the Community Land Trust Initiative is what rose to the top of those conversations. So in 2002, the City of Lakes was incorporated. We are a nonprofit organization. We are not an entity of the city. Sometimes there's a bit of confusion with City of Lakes in our name, that we are connected with the city, but we are an independent 501c3 organization. Our service area currently is the city of Minneapolis, and we are a community-controlled organization in that we have a board of directors, but I think more significantly is that our bylaws require that at any given time, the organization's 1/3 of the organization's board has to be individuals that we have served through the homeownership programs. So our homeowners also have a say, not just at the board level, but also in many of our committees of how the organization moves forward and a lot of the decision making. We are also a member-based organization. So if there are significant changes to bylaws, our ground lease, any type of things need to go in front of the larger membership in order to get them ratified at the end of the day. As far as who we serve, our mission is to serve individuals and families at 80% or less of area median income based on household size. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like right now in the city of Minneapolis, for a household of 4, the maximum income a household could earn would be $78,500 and still participate in one of the land trust home ownership programs. As I mentioned on the front end, our goal is to really create affordability today and then to preserve it for the long term. So once a home is in the land trust, it is meant to stay in the land trust in perpetuity. So we are able to create the affordability in this initial kind of transaction or any of the homes that we build, because we do receive funding from the city, the county, the state, federal, and private foundations to put into the homes that help to lower the cost of the home for a low and moderate income household. The way individuals and families can get into home ownership for the land trust is providing those homes at below what the market is usually requesting. We have a buyer initiated program, which allows individuals and families to go out and look for a home that's within their purchasing power. And within HIP, sorry, I'll try not to use too many abbreviations, but within HIP, their purchasing power is the amount that a household can qualify for in mortgage, plus the amount that the land trust is going to bring in affordability. For example, if a household can qualify for $150,000 and the land trust is bringing $50,000 in affordability assistance, that individual or family can go out with a realtor of their choice and look for a home anywhere in the city of Minneapolis and be able to offer up to $200,000. The other part of the HIP program is that we also usually have funds to address deferred maintenance on the home. So post-purchase, the land trust is addressing things like worn roofs, furnaces that are outdated, code items such as around plumbing or electricity. And we're also required to look at lead remediation, asbestos if it's present, and radon. We also do energy audits, and we actually do HERS ratings on our owner-occupied homes through the buyer-initiated program. And we have chosen to do the HERS audits because it provides a lot of valuable information that we can share with our homeowners, even though we may not always be able to address all of the recommendations that the audit provides. But the goal is really to try to assist that the home buyer initiated program buyer to not have a substantial repair in the first 1 to 3 years of home ownership. Project Sustain Legacy is also another avenue for ownership through the land trust. And this is a program where we assist existing homeowners who are facing some financial challenges, usually due to a major or catastrophic event in their life, like a loss of partner, a divorce, medical, maybe just some family situations. And so over the course of the last 10 years, we've been able to help 12 households that have been longtime Minneapolis residents, many sometimes between 20 and 40 years of ownership. They were at risk of losing their home through tax forfeiture or foreclosure from a small mortgage. And so similar, kind of using the HIP model, but specific to existing homeowners, those homeowners agree that in exchange for us to be able to satisfy the debt that's outstanding, they agree to quitclaim the land to the land trust, which we own the land in all of the homes that are in the land trust, except for condominiums, which I'll touch on in just a second. And then we also go in and address deferred maintenance. We have learned through Project Sustain Legacy that just to assist on the front end with the financial remedy does not necessarily stabilize or help a household be sustainable without addressing the significant deferred maintenance that we often see in these situations. The other one that's not up here is what we're talking about this evening, which is new construction homes or homes that the land trust acquires and rehabs, like 210 West 46th Street. So those we are actually either acquiring the vacant lot and acquiring the home, we construct or we rehab. And in the course of planning for this project, we've identified affordability sources. So going into a project, we have an estimate of what the market value of a home will be post-rehab or once constructed. And then we also have identified the affordability assistance. And so we're gonna also, in relation to 3916 Blaisdell, I'll show you some of those numbers just to give you a sense of how we look at things in trying to reach a low to moderate income buyer. So how we preserve affordability for the future is that there's a long-term agreement that is signed at the time of closing between the land trust, homeowner, and the organization. If it is a single family home, a townhome, or a duplex, that agreement is called a ground lease. If it is a condominium, it is referred to as a housing subsidy covenant. The difference being that with a condominium, there's usually not a single parcel of land that's directly associated with a particular home or townhome or duplex. And so we aren't able to take ownership of the land unless we own the whole land under all the condominiums. So in a condominium situation, we're actually placing a deed restriction on the home that is a renewable 30-year agreement with the homeowner. In the ground lease situation, it's actually a 99-year renewable agreement. In this agreement, the two biggest things are that the home must be sold to another income qualified buyer. At any time that a land trust home is sold, it has to be sold to another 80% or less area median income buyer. And the sale price is calculated using the resale formula in either the ground lease or the covenant. And that resale formula is going to calculate based off of the land trust price we establish in the first sale. And I'm going to walk through an example to show you what this looks like, because I think it's always helpful to see actual numbers and just to see what this looks like. But through that resale formula, we're able to keep the home affordable in, I would say, all but one case so far, that we've been able to do it without any additional affordability assistance. And the only time we ever had to go back and ask for a little bit more from actually the county at the time was when 2008 to 2012, when the values were had been lost so substantially in homes. Our involvement in the resale is that we do the calculating price of the new home based on the the new sale price of the home based on the resale formula. The agreement that we enter into with our homeowners also gives the land trust right of first refusal. So we do have an opportunity to step in and buy the home back if we want to or need to. And in most cases, we do not. We usually facilitate a transaction from the existing homeowner to the next CLT homeowner rather than step in. There have been a few occasions where it just made sense for everyone involved for the land trust to step in and take the home back, take title to the home, and then resell the home to another land trust buyer. And then we do help with marketing of that home for our existing homeowners. So how does this all work? If you look at a conventional transaction versus a land trust transaction, and yes, you can kind of tell these numbers are a little outdated with our current values in Minneapolis, but in both cases, the market value is going to be the same, whether it's a land trust transaction or conventional transaction. Where it becomes different is that buyer's first mortgage amount. So in the case of a conventional transaction, in most cases, buyers are getting some level. Sorry, we have a very active fire station by our office, so hopefully we won't get too many sirens. But in most cases, buyers are getting some level of down payment assistance. So even in a conventional transaction, a buyer is going to get $5,000, $10,000 to help with closing costs and just general down payment. So you may see a loan of about $155,000. Principal and interest at that level is going to be about $850. Taxes and insurance about $215. And in this case, because there's not a significant down payment, most likely there's going to be some level of private mortgage insurance that's needed. In the land trust transaction, we're going to assume for the example purposes that $40,000 is coming from the land trust in affordability. So that buyer's mortgage is going to be $120,000, which is about $660 in principal and interest, $215 in taxes and insurance. And because our investment is seen as equity in the home and viewed by our partner lenders as down payment, we are usually satisfying the 20% requirement that's needed to not have private mortgage insurance. And then we also have a ground lease fee that's paid on a monthly basis, which is $20. So the total monthly cost, if you look on the conventional transaction, is $1,125 in this example. And on the land trust, it's $885, which is a monthly savings of about $240. Or over the course of 5 years, there's a savings of about $14,000, which is just straight housing cost. We acknowledge and realize that there are other expenses associated with home ownership, but when you just look at the basic housing cost, you'll see a savings on a monthly basis as well as over time in ownership of the home. So at some point in time, this existing homeowner decides to sell, but now the property is worth $200,000. And when we look at this, we're going to look at the current property value of $200,000 minus the $160,000, which leads to an increased net increase in value of $40,000. In the ground lease and in the covenant, our agreement with our homeowners says that 25% of that net value increase, which is market-based equity, is the homeowner share, and 30,000, which I am going to change the slide after tonight, is actually remains with the property. I don't like it to say the CLCLT share because that is not profit to the organization. That 30,000 is left in the property and added to our original investment of 40,000 in this example, to then be able to sell the home at below what the current value of 200,000 is being asked. So when we look at that, you see the initial buyer's price of 120, and now we have the 10,000 that was the increase, and we have a new buyer price of 130,000. I prefer the second example that's coming up. I think is a little easier for me to always wrap my mind around, is that if you think about it, we have a new value of $200,000, and we're going to keep that $30,000 or 75% of the value increase, as well as the $40,000. So we're going to go from a $200,000 home, and now the buyer, the next CLT buyer, is going to purchase that home for $130,000 versus $200,000. And we achieve that through the original investment from public, usually public investment, as well as the partnership and the agreement with our homeowners. So we just see a growth in that initial investment in an appreciating market to about $70,000. And as I mentioned, it's a 130 price point versus 200, which is going to be much more achievable for a low and moderate income household than the 200,000. And over the last 12 to 18 months, probably going on 2 years now, these prices have increased substantially, as I think probably we're all aware who are on this call. So now I just wanted to talk about 3916 Blaisdell. And I'm going to ask that Marnie join the conversation. I'm going to continue to manage those slides, but I'd like to just have Marnie give an overview of how we've gotten here to where we're at right now. And then we are going to bring up some preliminary drawings. These are not the final, and they're not the approved drawings from the city, but we wanted to be able to show you what we've been working on and where we're headed with this particular design. So Marnie, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. I'd say about maybe 2 years ago, the neighborhood approached the CLCLT to look at how something might be done on the site. It's a site that the neighborhood has, for a long time, wanted to do affordable housing on, but it's a very difficult site. It's narrow to begin with, and then the adjacent properties on both sides have parts of buildings that are encroaching over the property line, as well as some of the sidewalk and access points. So we did go through a pretty lengthy process with the city and worked with people in zoning as well as the building code official to show that it was possible to build something on this site, although there are a lot of restrictions, as you will see, of where on the site we can build due to the nature of the site, as well as both adjacent properties being multifamily housing, which requires a bit more of a setback. So Stacy, if you want to show the site plan first.
I'm just going to go to full screen, Marnie, so that you can. Okay.
So you'll notice, so in the middle of this drawing here is this long, narrow building, and you'll notice that it's set way back from the street side, and that is because we have to create sort of, well, like property lines that are not true property lines, but property lines sort of that are telegraphed off the adjacent buildings so that we can create the setbacks and show where we can be building. And that's what has kind of forced us into this area where we have enough space from the building to the north as well as the south. And because of the narrowness of this building for more than 80% of it, we will need to get a variance, and that is a process we'll have to be, we have not started yet, but we will need to show the city all of our plans and how, what we're asking for. The width of the building is 15'6", and I believe it's 18 feet is the minimum of what we're supposed to be allowed without having to do variance, so a little bit narrower. So this building, because of its restrictions on the site and kind of what we have to work with, we decided to do look at offering a different type of housing option than just a typical single family house. And so what we're proposing here is a single family house, but with an ADU, and it's an internal ADU, which means the separate unit is within the building itself. And so if Stacy, maybe just go to the elevations for a second.
Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I think I have to go out and come back in. One sec. Yep. Sorry, all. I'm having my screen's going a little wonky on me. There we go. You want to go to elevations?
Sure, let's go there and then we'll come back to plan.
Okay.
One more. So we're looking at the east elevation, which is the street side one in the upper right-hand corner. This is what faces the street. It will scale as a single family house, but in this building, the ADU part, which is typically the smaller unit, is on the first floor. And then the main unit of the single family owner would be the upper floor unit. And so then there is a little bit of shared space. Why don't you flip to the first floor plan now? Okay, all right, this.
Good.
All right, so these drawings are labeled incorrectly, they're old, but the top drawing is the second floor and the bottom drawing is the first floor. So, whoops, sorry. Top drawing is the first floor. The bottom drawing is the second floor. So both of the unit that is on the bottom is a smaller unit, 1 bedroom, has a kitchenette, living and dining area, and is accessed from the back side of the house only because an ADU is not allowed to have a doorway facing the street. We're also keeping the construction type, floor type down so that we can keep this as low as possible, and the bottom floor unit will be accessible. It will have a sloped walk, so it can have a 0 grade entry from the back. Then and then there's that person could potentially come in from the garage and come into this first floor unit, and then the bathroom is designed to be accessible, and we have 3-foot doorways within the unit as well. And then the entryway down there also has a shared laundry that both units can access. Then the second floor unit, and let me see, I can't remember how many square feet this is. Maybe we can go back to the first page in a little bit, but or the site plan, I think it shows on. So the second floor unit can be accessed from the front or the back. And coming up to that sort of shared back entry, the person can go up the back stair or from the front door. There is a little vestibule, and then the stairs come up into the living and dining area. This one also is a 1-bedroom unit, but has a much more generous living, dining, kitchen area and some storage. The basement then is unfinished. If you want to go back to the foundation plan on the previous sheet, the basement is just unfinished, basically a mechanical space right now. It can be accessed by both units, and it could become a storage space as needed. It'll have one egress window for future finishing. And then let's see, can you go back to the site plan, and I'll just see if I have noted the sizes for people to go up a little bit. Well, the gross buildings area is 1,600 square feet. I think the lower one is unit is around 600 square feet, and then the upper unit is about 840. So, not huge units, but nice size units to give people another option of living style. And both of them just 1 bedroom. But again, like flexibility for the homeowner who would live here to use it either as perhaps another family member or as some other living arrangement as well.
Great. Thanks, Marnie. I'm going to go back to the presentation because I just want to share a few more numbers. So great. So what I mentioned before was when we start a project like this, we tend to look at the total development cost as well as what we think the market value will be and what a target that we try to reach for the buyer first mortgage. So these numbers are, I want to say, about 6 to 9 months old. So the market value I anticipate may be slightly higher. But right now we're anticipating a total development cost of about $365,000 and an estimated market value of $310,000. Some of the assistance that we receive from the city are project gap, and that will help to make the difference between the total development cost and what we will be able to sell, not sell the property for, but the market value of the property. And then what we've looked at in the pro forma is an estimated buyer first mortgage, a land trust buyer first mortgage of about $192,500. And with that, if you look at the 310 minus the 192.5, we had to figure out how to come up with about $117 or close to $120,000 in affordability to make the home in this particular lot and the design that we've developed affordable to an 80% or less area median income household. $20,000 of that $117.5 is a contribution from Kingfield Neighborhood Association. The $37.5 is going to come from City of Minneapolis long-term affordability and some of our project gap. And then we also have some funding allocated from Minnesota Housing. I think also just to demonstrate the importance of the neighborhood partnership is that there will be some interim construction financing that we can use on this project. And Kingfield has agreed to forgive about $10,000 in interest, provided that we can build the project promptly. But this has become a huge piece of development, is not just trying to solve for the affordability piece, but also being able to find that interim construction financing that doesn't really start to impact affordability because of the interest that is layered on it. And we did have a question that was shared earlier about how we might be able to achieve greater affordability. So while 80% or less of area median income is a step in the right direction, the question was posed of whether or not we could serve 50% or less of area median income. And I just wanted to share what the numbers might look like to try to get to that level. And the first part, this 4-person household, when we think about trying to set a price point for affordability and buyer first mortgage, kind of the industry standard is to look at a 4-person household. And so right now at 50% area median income in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, that 2020 income limit is the maximum, like the median income for a 50% area, 50% household, excuse me, is $51,700 for a household of 4. If we look at a monthly housing payment being 30% of a household's monthly income, that is going to result in a housing payment being available to a 4-person household of about $1,230. And the reason we look at 30% is because that's kind of the federal guideline to say, HUD says, you know, we shouldn't be spending more than 30% of our income towards housing. So we just kind of use that industry standard. At 1,230, and I used a 4% interest rate over 30 years because we do require a fixed rate conventional mortgage. And I went a little bit higher on current interest rates, just kind of not knowing when the home would be completed. That would essentially translate into a mortgage amount being available to a 50% household at about $177,500. So if you remember, we have about $117,000 already invested in this property. We'd need about $15,000 or so to be able to try to reach a 50% household. Because this is a bit smaller with the 1-bedroom, 1-bath units, I thought it was important that we demonstrate a 2-person household. And you'll see as the income goes lower, the need for affordability starts to increase significantly. So in the case of a 2-person household, the 50% median income right now is $41,400, which translates into a monthly housing payment estimated at just over $1,000, again at that 30% of the monthly. And then using, you know, a standard mortgage calculator resulting in $140,000. So now we would need, on top of what we've already planning to invest, an additional $52,500. So wanted to share this as we think about affordability, just really trying to convey what is needed to reach lower income households, which is our goal. We, on average now, our average AMI across all programs is about 54% area median income. We've seen it creep up in the last couple of years, hitting at about 60 to 61% area median income. But that is our average across the board of the 300. We do have just a little bit over 300 homes in the land trust right now, and we serve close to 390 home owners, and the difference is that we've had 85 resales of existing homes. So just wanted to put that out there for consideration's sake. And that is where we're willing to field questions now, or Chris, however you want to proceed with questions that may have cropped up during the presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for those who have, we do have a few questions that have come in. One of the kind of the questions around like ADUs, I think, thank you, Rosemary, for clarifying ADU, accessory dwelling unit, is what we're referring to with that acronym. Is an ADU within a building still considered a single family home? And the question kind of referring to how many people can live in this property is the question. And I would also ask maybe like, how many people do you see living in this property? Maybe based on the size and bedroom unit or bedroom number.
I will answer the first part. The ADU within a building is still only considered a single family home. It is not considered a duplex. There are not duplications of the utilities. There's no fire separation, and it is required to be, one of the parts of the home is required to be lived in by the owner of the property. I don't believe there's a number through zoning or housing ordinance of how many people can live in there. I would imagine it would be 2 to 4 people total with the bedroom units that we have.
And I would echo that sentiment. In rental, there is certain restrictions for non-family members or non-related, but in home ownership, I'm not aware of any policy or requirement with the city. The other thing I should mention is that through the land trust, the homes have to be occupied by owner occupied. So our ground lease and our covenant require at least 8 consecutive months a year that they be owner occupied. It's rare that we ever have someone, we have situations where maybe a homeowner may do an internship somewhere for a couple months and have someone caretake a home, but it's meant to be owner occupied. It's not meant to be an investment property. And with the ADU requirement also requiring occupancy of one of the units by a homeowner, it just kind of layers both of those together to ensure that an owner is present.
This kind of is a similar question, and I think you've touched on this a little bit, but kind of what makes, can you just reiterate what makes that bottom unit an ADU versus like two different they call it upper lower twin home, but yeah, just 2 different actual units or 2 different properties, I guess would be the question.
Yeah, so for a duplex, which is what it sort of looks like, it would have to have fire separation between the 2 units. It would have to have separate utilities, furnace and water heater for both, and the owner would not have to live there. It could be just an investor or absent, landlord who did not live there owning the property. An ADU, for an ADU, there are 3 types of ADUs that are allowed in the city. There's the detached one that people are maybe familiar with as sort of a carriage house, sort of over the garage style. There is an attached ADU where it could be an existing house with an addition put onto it, and that addition could be a separate ADU, or there is a means of kind of carving out an ADU from within an existing house, or in this case, it's new, but where the whole, both units are kind of within the main mass of the building.
Great. There's 2 questions here that have come in about like the ADU, the unit, and how you would incorporate additional income into the calculation of affordability, and that was the question. And then, have you done any other projects that incorporate or already have, I guess, ADUs in them? So 2-part question.
Sure. So when we look at income, we have to look at gross income, annual gross income, and we have to calculate and know the income for anyone over the age of 18 that would be living in the property at time of closing. So in a situation, and part of the reason that we started looking at accessory dwelling units and even duplexes being acquired through either an acquisition rehab program or a buyer initiated program, is we had very consistently a request from buyers who wanted to look at multi-generational living. And so if it's a situation where we know that there may be, I think of like some of our homeowners who have grown adult children with special needs. And so while they want some independence, there's still the caretaking that needs to happen. If we know that there is, that dependent is earning income or is receiving Social Security, disability, we need to include that income in our calculation for the total household income. If someone does not know who is going to be in the home at the time of closing, then it's not usually included. So in one of our accessory dwelling units, we actually had a single person who purchased the home that had the accessory dwelling unit, but purchased it purposefully because she knew her grandmother was going to be probably transitioning in a couple years' time, but didn't exactly know when. Since that was not definite, we did not know that income, and we did not need to include it at the time. So generally, it's just if we know who's going to be in the home at time of closing, we need to have income on anyone who's over 18, and that all counts towards the income. This can get a little tricky because sometimes one person is on the mortgage, and there's some disconnect sometimes with buyers when they're like, but so-and-so's not going to be on the mortgage. That may be true, but our funders require income from everyone that's over 18. And then we do have 4 existing properties that have accessory dwelling units. They're attached to the home rather than interior, but they're all one big house, right, Marnie? So the first 2 we did were at 4700 and 4704 Bryant Avenue North. And then we have one at 4012th Avenue South. And then one at 1505 Russell Avenue North.
You kind of touched on this a little bit with ADUs, but is there, kind of looking at like the 4-person, like thinking about AMI and a 4-person household, is there a reason why this house just wasn't 2 or 3 bedrooms as compared to doing 2 ADUs? Is like, how does that kind of, what moved you towards an ADU? You touched on some of the points, but is there any other kind of like comparison you can make between an ADU and one unit versus like kind of more of one single family home with multiple bedrooms?
Do you want to touch on that, Marnie, or would you like me to?
Well, I think there's kind of 2 reasons. This particular site is so restrictive that it becomes difficult to lay out bedrooms, especially in the narrowness of it, and just a good flow in the house. Also, I think we saw the challenges of the site for a typical house made it a good opportunity to offer a different option of living. And I think, it's my personal opinion, but that because of the cost of new construction, when we are doing new developments, it's a nice thing to be able to offer something that is not out there as a different option of a way of living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know that I have much to add to that. I think we have tried to be purposeful in thinking about where there might be some missing elements in housing options and seeing what we can do when we have an opportunity to construct versus having to rehab an existing structure, which we're kind of confined to what's there other than, changing an interior a bit. So I would just support what Marnie was sharing about why we chose to go down the path we have with the size bedrooms and bath.
Great. There's a question about, is it possible for the homeowner to rent that ADU unit to a stranger, right? To put it out there on the rental market and rent that after they own the property?
I'm pausing because I don't know where the city landed on rental of ADUs. I think it is possible, isn't it, Marnie?
Yeah, for the city, it is, though via the ground lease. Do you have a restriction on that?
We do not necessarily have a restriction on that because we have duplexes in the land trust and we don't put restrictions on who can live in the duplex. So I don't know that at this time we don't have a restriction rental. It is not our intent to make it a rental unit. It really truly is trying to be designed for the multi-generational. But I don't know that, I know we don't have anything in place that would necessarily restrict that. I think the one thing to always keep in mind is that the owner has to be present in one of the units. So the entire home cannot be rented out because of the land trust and the ground lease agreement.
And I think I'll just add to that the the land trust ground lease agreement will stay as is. I have heard that the city is exploring possibilities of changing the ADU law to allow both parts of the house and ADU to be rented out. So if that changes, there is still the CLCLT ground lease that would protect that.
And that would be with anyone who owns the home in perpetuity. So it's not just with the first buyer, which sometimes there's an owner occupancy requirement with first sale, but not necessarily upon resales. With the being in the land trust, it will remain owner occupied at least one of the units.
Okay, great. Well, and then just kind of maybe to touch on it, maybe you can just speak to it again. Kind of talking about, there's been a lot of conversation that we've had in the neighborhood about affordable housing and figuring out ways to increase affordable housing for everyone in the neighborhood, but specifically for those, targeting that under 50% of AMI. So you kind of showed that that slide on what that would take, and I think for that, the 4-person household, an additional investment of 15,000, a 2-person household, which seems more maybe close to the reality of what would work in this property, an additional investment of 52,000. How do you feel, I think there's a desire for residents to say, how do we make this more affordable? Can we put up money? Can the neighborhood put up money? Can we I don't want to say pressure, but can we push the neighborhood organization to, supply more? I guess, do you just maybe want to speak to that again and how that would work if say somebody came to you and said, hey, I have $15,000 that I would like to give to this project with the goal of making it even more affordable?
Yeah, so I think one example, as I shared, Kingfield, from a neighborhood group perspective, has already committed 20,000, and that will be, an agreement between the land trust and Kingfield that will stay with the home. So again, that 20,000 is going to be leveraged over time and multiple households. So that's one way. If an individual came to us and said, we have 15,000 or a group of residents, individuals, I think the best way to do that is that it becomes a designated contribution to the land trust and gets rolled into all the affordability. Remember that investment, whether it's 117 or whether we get incredibly creative and supportive and we raise 200,000 and can serve a 40% household, would be amazing. And all of that's going to stay upon each resale. So I think being able to do something where either an individual or a group of individuals, we're very open to that. And I have a question was posed to me earlier about, could the funds, if they came specific to this property, but with the intention of making sure that lower income household was served, not just in the first one, but over time, could we restrict sale of the home to a 50% or less area median income? I do have that question into the city because I'm not sure with city funding, but I will definitely get back with you all, Chris, you and Sarah, about whether or not we can do that. We have had restricted funds that came through city and county previously that we had to serve 60% or less or 50% or less AMI. I'm just not sure if it comes from a third party source and not a public funding that we can put those restrictions, but I wanted to let you know I am investigating that. So I think what I've seen work most effectively and neighborhood groups have supported us is bringing some additional funds so that we can further write down the cost of the home and try to get as low as we can as far as who we're serving. Frankly, we can serve as low as we could possibly go if the money is there, right? It's just the fact that some of the funders are not ready to say that they want to put 100,000 just in their own funds into a home. Some of our South Side properties in the last couple of years have been 150 to 100 and I think 70 some thousand to make them affordable. And so that's a number of different sources. And I always think of it as kind of as a puzzle of like, where can we fit all these pieces to put this affordability package together. So I think the key message I would say is that we're very open to trying to figure out how to do this. And it's a conversation which I'm deeply appreciative that's happening at multiple levels and neighborhoods, from the individuals to groups to small groups, and that we have a mechanism. And I think that's the important piece, is that we have a mechanism that has demonstrated success to keep that affordability leveraged over time to not just one household, but each time it's sold, it's going to continue to be reinvested. You're going to continue to help low and moderate income households. Now, can we keep it affordable at 50% on every resale? Depends on what the market does, right? And that's beyond our control. But the lower we can get on the front end, the more space we have to continue to serve lower as the resales, continue to happen over time. I hope, does that answer? Or?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think there was just a supplement question. Maybe could you go back to the slide that shows this specific project and the financing around this specific project? And the question is, can you clarify the affordability investment needed at 80% AMI for a 2-person family? So and maybe if this person could, Elizabeth, if you could clarify, are you speaking specifically about this project? That was my assumption, is what the affordability investment that's happening right now is.
I don't know that I could do it for a 2-person household without getting off screen and doing some calculations.
Yeah.
What I can tell you generally is that we try to target around 60 to 65% AMI when we're doing our numbers and figuring out the pro forma. We don't try to ever go up close to 80%, because if we're at 79% on the first sale, we have very little breathing room in an appreciating market of serving an 80% household upon resale without additional funds. So we try to kind of target a lower number, but I'd have to do some calculation, and I can certainly do that and share it with you, Chris, if you want to forward it to the person.
Because I think the question I think this is what she was getting at, was the estimated buyer's first mortgage, that $192,000 at 80% or less. Is that for a 2-person household or a 4-person?
That's going to be closer to, I want to say, I'm not quite sure.
No, that's
the reason being is it's been a while since I've done these calculations, and it's probably going to be closer to a 4-person. Okay. Just because that's kind of the average we tend to take a look at. I'd have to go back and do the calculation to find out for sure. So sorry, I didn't think along those lines ahead of time.
Yep, no problem. And the person says that they apologize for putting you on the spot. And
no, not at all. It's a great question. I just, yeah, it's a great question. And sometimes we're just trying to solve to do the project. I'll be really candid. And I think we just historically, the other thing that we use as a gauge is what we see our average buyer coming through the program. So with the buyer initiated program, they have to be pre-qualified. And so as we look at what our average AMI is versus, what their first mortgage is, it gets us a sense of where we need to land on that buyer first mortgage.
Got it. And I will just say for everybody too, we'll continue to share information on this project. So for questions like clarifications, right, we'll continue to work with Stacy and continue to work with Marty to put out additional information as it comes up, and as I'm sure this project will slowly evolve and tweak and change.
Yes.
There are some questions about the encroachments on either side of the property, and how that impacts usage, and if there's also any legal implications to the properties that are encroaching. Are legal right-of-ways being granted or something similar is the question. So
yeah, I can talk about that one. We did work with a lawyer to write up some draft language that would document granting easements to the properties on either side, because of where we're allowed to build, where we're restricted to be building because of the setbacks. None of the actual building parts that come over the property lines affect us or will be really an issue here. It's we do have sidewalks that are coming onto the property that we have in our initial draft. We have allowed all of the sidewalk on the north one remains. We are taking out the sidewalk on the south one, but replacing it with a new sidewalk that goes down to the public walk and then is shared, so that the unit on the south end that is accessed by the side can still use that shared walk and come to their unit. They no longer can cross through to the backyard though. And then the other unit to the north, one of the units on the part of the building that projects into our property there accesses their unit from that right there in the center there. And they will still be able to do that. There will be no change to that. So they will have an easement that will allow them to access the buildings and maintain their, come onto the property to maintain the buildings. But anything that is removed will not be able to be put back in the future encroachments. So.
There's a question kind of, I guess, relating a little bit to that, but is about kind of construction timeline, when we see this starting, and kind of just a general conversation around maybe like noise impacts to adjacent properties. So could you address maybe timing and also just kind of the impacts of construction?
Sure. So timing is a little tough right now. We do have to seek a variance, which for a while was paused with the shelter in place, and it's been active again. And so that's what Marnie and I have been working towards, submitting that variance. And then I will be candid but tactful. It's always difficult to know how long it will take to go through plan review with the city. So if we cannot make a fall construction time, because we still need to go out to bid to a general contractor, all of those pieces, I think, and Marnie, you can jump in if you think I'm not being realistic. I do think hitting a fall timeframe to start digging is going to be difficult. So we'd probably look more towards spring. Ideally, we'd like to start this fall, but I'm not overly optimistic with just the timelines for responses and the things we need to work through. So from that, it's partly dependent on the contractor schedule, which is another piece that we're encountering with just their schedules and timelines. We have been hitting about a year from the time that we start digging to certificate of occupancy. So I would say sometime between this fall and the end of next year, depending on when we can break ground, is when most of the construction. Where we've seen the greatest, I would say, disruption in the neighbors, not intentionally, but just because it is construction, is the excavation and getting the basements poured, getting foundations poured, and then getting the back grade. And then once that piece kind of comes, there still will be, people coming and going, but I don't feel like it's that as disruptive as that initial excavation. Marnie, do you have thoughts?
I guess I would concur with you that getting in the ground this fall would be tough. And it kind of depends on how fast the city can move through the variance process. They've told me in the past it's about a 2 to 3 month process. Also, I've been seeing jobs that, small rehab jobs that typically take a day to go through plan review are taking 2 weeks. And so something like this, which often takes a month, may take longer. They've been backlogged since the review desks were shut down for so long. So those are things that will factor into when it gets started.
And Chris, I would just say, in addition to this meeting, we are required to host another meeting, and we try to do that on site so that we're more accessible for neighbors to come and ask questions. At that time, we'll have a more updated plan, just with a few revisions that need to happen. So similar to those who were notified, especially from the land trust letter that, it was a Kingfield letter that came on land trust envelope. That same radius of neighbors will be receiving that pre-construction meeting notice as well. And so there will be another opportunity to just kind of touch base on where we're at and timelines with that also. But at any point in time, anyone's welcome to reach out to me as well, and just to check in to see where we're at. I think it's just, I'm finding it's tougher and tougher to be able to give specifics until we've got approved plans, contractor in place, and commitment for when the contractor will start.
Great. Yeah, and I would say for those, to kind of the question of timing, we'll be in as a neighborhood and as a redevelopment committee, we'll be kind of in, I don't want to say constant, but we'll be in continual conversation with Stacy and their team to see how things are going. One of the, I think we have a couple more questions, just one and then a quick one. Can you speak to the demographics of the clients who have worked with the land trust historically, and whether you have kind of longer term relationships with those who purchase homes from you?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So right now, on average, I mentioned the AMI average that we've been holding at about 54%. Very similarly, 54% of our homeowners are community of color households, and we have about 8% that are households with disabilities. 75 to 80% of our households are single head of households. And our service of 55 and older is about 7 to 8%, as well as new immigrant population is about 7 to 8%. And there was, what was the second part of the question, Chris? It was the demographics, and then there was some.
Your kind of long-term relationship with,
oh, thank you.
with the
Yeah.
homeowners.
So one of the things that we are very focused and try to be very focused with our homeowners. As you might expect, we don't go away from this deal. We own the land, so this is a long-term partnership, and our goal is to have as solid a relationship that we can have with each of our homeowners. We do monthly trainings with our homeowners. We also used to do activities and trainings, but have been shifting to more of like a one-time event where we try to connect with our homeowners. But our goal is to be that first resource. We may not have the answers. We may not always be able to respond the way our homeowners want, but our goal is that if something transpires, loss of job, potential, situation with mortgage, we really want that relationship to be in place so that our homeowners are reaching out to us, because it makes it so much easier to try to reset a household, kind of redirect, support them, sustain them when we get called 2 days after they may have lost a job, then 3 months down the road when they're already 3 months delinquent on a mortgage or headed toward foreclosure. I think as we've grown, we continue to try to figure out how to retain those connections. We do a monthly e-newsletter to our homeowners. But I would say the training, the personal relationships, creating that relationship from the first phone call. I always say, it starts with the first phone call or the first visit to the office. And if we don't do that right, it's really tough to reestablish a solid relationship with the homeowners. Does everyone like us? Absolutely not. And does everybody want to talk to us or hear from us? Absolutely not. But those are few and far between. And those that do, we respect that. And they know that when they go to resell, they do have to talk with us. But otherwise, if it's a no, please don't call me, please don't send anything, we totally respect that. But I would say out of the 300 and some homeowners, at least 80 to 90% of us, of those homeowners, pretty much anyone in here could tell you a lot of their backstory and their current situation and their current relationships that we have with them. So it's definitely not very transactional, other than what we have to contractually or from a legal standpoint.
And it looks like the last question that we have is in regards to parking. It sounds like there was a question about is there any parking planned? I don't think we went. I see a stalled garage on the, or a 2-stall garage on the plan. And I'm just looking up the map right now, but it seems like it seems like somebody is parking on that property currently. I guess, do you just want to address maybe what your plan is for parking for the property, and then maybe even what's happening right now, because it sounds like there's currently parking happening on that property.
Yes, so it's not uncommon that vacant lots have additional parking. It's very common that we find that just kind of the back part of a vacant lot may be being used by neighbors. Once we start construction, that will need to change. And we do have a plan for a 2-car garage, a 2-stall garage coming off the alley. So there will be on-site parking, and not, other than for visitors, there should not be a need for on-street parking. But unfortunately, we will impact anyone who's parking there now by the fact of just starting construction and building a garage there.
Okay, I think those were all of the questions that everybody had. Unless you want to try to sneak one in there really quickly, I'll just thank Stacy and Marnie, and thank everyone for joining us. This also is being recorded right now, and it looks like we got a recording all the way through, which is great. So if you feel free to share this with neighbors, this discussion, we'll put it up on our Kingfield YouTube page. I've also included my email address over in the chat, which is pretty simple, chris@kingfield.org. And we can direct any communication. And as Stacy said, I'm sure she'll reach out to them directly if you have any questions on this project. And then we'll continue to have conversations with the land trust, and also internally with the neighborhood association and our residents about ways that maybe we could talk about that affordability and that kind of initial price. So I think more conversations on that to come, more discussions on that to come, and we'll go from there. So I guess, again, I'll just say thank you both for joining us. Thank you, everybody. And we will leave it there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.